what are you particularly obsessively geeky about?
Wow, that's a good question. As a kid, I loved video games. Like, I loved growing up playing like my Atari and my ColecoVision. I obsessively, collect like Plastic Man comics. Like, I loved Plastic Man as a kid, and G.I. Joe when they did like the big G.I. Joe reboot in like the early '80s.
Mm-hmm.
So those, but now, what am I obsessive about now? Probably the biggest thing is the thing that I'm most obsessive about are like vinyl toys in and around like lowbrow art and like Pop's realist art, stuff that like Ron English, who did the Fat Ronald for Super Size Me back in the day, turned me on to this whole world of artists. That now that is kind of like my big geek obsession passion.
Well, but when you were younger, did you feel a community with other people that had the same kind of obsessions that you did, or? Yeah,
but I mean, back then, there were people that I was friends with where we all would geek out over these types of things. But it's not like it is now. Like back then, it wasn't nearly as cool to be a geek and to love this stuff. You know, it's like you go back. Like I'm 40, and you go back that long, and you weren't seen as being the cool kid if you liked comic books and you liked to play video games, and it became much more of a cultural phenomenon that was acceptable in the late 80s, early 90s. But I feel like that comic books were still seen as like that kind of subgenre of things you didn't really get to be cool if you liked. And now you got frat guys wearing Green Lantern T-shirts.
It's seeped into the mainstream culture now.
Absolutely. And I was having this conversation earlier today. Is like there was this idea of like geeks were people who geeks were the guys who liked comic books and these types of oddball things. Nerds were the people who loved to like computer program and like sit alone in a room. And now those two have converged, and those people now control everything. So those geeks and nerds run the entertainment business. They run the computer businesses. They run every startup that's on the planet today. And so now, it has kind of bled into mainstream culture. Where now it is cool to be that geek and that nerd.
Yeah, they truly have inherited the earth. But this whole idea of a documentary started as a suggestion from Stan Lee, is that right?
As a conversation from Stan Lee. How bananas is that?
Wow.
That's crazy. Yeah, so no, Stan Lee and I, like Jeremy, my producing partner Jeremy Chilnick and I, we were casting for the Simpsons 20th anniversary special for Fox. And it was my first Comic-Con, and we were there, and I was like, this place is amazing. This place is like a movie. And he and I were talking about that. And then later that night, I'm at a party, a CAA party, CAA, which is my agency, and it's Stan Lee's agency. And I was there, and his agent says to me, Jessica Matthews says, "Would you like to meet Stan?" And I was like, "Oh my God, I would love to. It'd be an honor." So I went over and I was like, "Mr. Lee, as a kid growing up in West Virginia, you got to know how much you inspired me. Your comic books. They made this little awkward kid want to tell his own stories. They gave me confidence." And he was just like, "Oh my God, thank you." And he goes, "You know what? We should make a movie together. We should make a documentary. You know what? We should make a documentary about Comic-Con." And I was like, "That's a great idea, Mr. Lee. Thank you so much." And then literally I turned around and Peter Michelli, my TV agent at CAA, I said to Peter, he goes, "So how was it meeting Stan?" I was like, "It was amazing. We want to make a movie about Comic-Con." And Peter goes, "That's a great idea. You should meet my other client who's coming into town tomorrow." Cut to tomorrow as I'm having breakfast with Joss Whedon. And I'm sitting with Joss Whedon, telling him, saying, "Oh yeah, so Stan's on board. We want to make this movie about Comic-Con." And Joss is like, he goes, "Listen, I'm in." It was amazing. Like, it was the most crazy kind of Hollywood moment that has ever happened in my life.
What comes across so incredibly strongly in your movie is how beautiful and gracious Stan Lee is with his fans.
Yeah, completely. And he's one of those people he's such an inspiration. Like, for me, it was just such a thrill to get to work with Stan, and it was an even greater thrill to see just how he is still so passionate about something that now you got to think he's been doing for 60 years. That he's just as excited today as he was when he was 20. Here's a guy who every day, like I feel like I'm the luckiest guy ever. Stan Lee, and I didn't even create Spider-Man. It's like, imagine how much more happy I'd be if I invented like Thor and the X-Men. It's like, that's pretty awesome. I think that for him, here he is, in his mid-80s, and he's kind of seen the fruit of all his labors be so realized on such a grand scale with all of these films and just their acceptance in like such a mainstream way that I think he is. I think he's so gracious. I think he is so good with people, and he's nonstop. He's like the Energizer Bunny. The guy has more energy than anybody.
You know what? And I think he kind of epitomizes what characterizes a lot of them that attend the Comic-Con and all of them that are featured in your film, and that they kind of hold on to that sense of adolescent wonder.
Yeah. That's exactly right. Like I love Eli Roth telling the story of he goes like we were the first generation of kids like actually kept our Star Wars toys. So we kept our Star Wars figures because we thought that was all there is. And he goes, but no, it just keeps going. There's more things. There's more stuff. There's more things to be passionate about and excited about. And now that's going into a whole new generation. Like my son, who's 5 years old, like I showed him Star Wars like for the first time when he was like 3. And, now I grew up loving Star Wars action figures. Now my son, he loves Star Wars 50. Now he loves Star Wars Lego figures. And so we're building all the crazy things out of, like, Legos for Star Wars. And it's amazing. There is this kind of I told somebody else what I love about Comic-Con, and that's one of the things that you see in the film where we talk to a lot of families. You see couples that fell in love. You see families that are there at Comic-Con together. Is there is this magical thing that comes through not just comics, not just movies, not through video games, and kind of this whole kind of pop culture phenomenon that it represents. There is something familial about it that you can pass down to someone, that you can share with someone. That isn't just a friend. That it can be something that you share with your son or your daughter.
Absolutely, but it started out very humbly. They're hoping, as it says in your film, for at least
500.
Maybe
they were hoping for 500 people. Cut to 35 years later, and here they are with 150,000 people.
Was there a moment, do you think, that a kind of defining moment where it became a phenomenon, where that changed?
That's a really good question. It would have to be probably somewhere around. I bet it for the first time it happened was probably around the first Batman, probably around like the Michael Keaton Batman. I can imagine that was big. And then I would think it would be I almost put those film milestones as being ones that bring more attention to Comic-Con, because that's what those films do a great job of. People love to say that it's ruined Comic-Con, but what I think those films do is they bring a tremendous amount of attention to this place that deserves attention.
Right. So you don't feel, because this is covered a bit in your film, when the businesses and the studios figured out that they had potential big money source in this event. People started complaining that it was the commercialization of Comic-Con, but you don't feel that.
But when I was 12 years old, or I'm trying to remember how old I was when I went to my first comic book convention. There were already people there selling knickknacks that had to deal with films. They were selling lunch boxes from, Shazam and Batman and all this other stuff. There was already a merchandising going on. What people realized in kind of this the post-Star Wars world and everything else is that you could really commodify everything around these properties. And so what Comic-Con has done is just kind of further expanded on that, and it's the commodification of everything within the popular arts. So it's not just movies and video games; it's everything. And all of those, a lot of them still do stem from comic books. And I buy more comic books now and read more comic books now as an adult than I ever read as a kid. I don't go physically buy paper comics. I download them, from Comixology and put them on my iPad. But I buy and read more now, and I know other friends of mine, are exactly the same way. So I don't think it's hurting the comic book business. It may be hurting kind of that trade version, but the trade version is being hurt in every business.
Right.
Absolutely. Just like people, it's like paper books aren't being bought now. People are buying their e-books. So that side of the business is faltering. The creation of comic books themselves is not.
Before I let you go,
sure.
I want to ask you. You have a film at Tribeca too. You're busy.
Yes, Mansome. It is a movie about being manly and handsome. Mansome. And it was fun. Great. Like, we made that film with Will Arnett and Jason Bateman, and it's a doc that looks at this, crazy, ridiculous world of male grooming. And I think people will think it's funny.